What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Culture FC, the weekly soccer show where we cover all culturally relevant aspects of the beautiful game. We cover lifestyle, fashion, music, culture, politics, all of the things surrounding the beautiful game, just none of the results happening on the pitch. My name is Louie, and I am joined here with my co-host, Brendan.
Howdy, howdy.
And this week we have a very special episode for you. We spoke with Seth, who is the senior editor of the Bent Musket, which is a blog part of the SB Nation network that focuses solely on the New England Revolution. And we talked to him about so many different aspects of the team, where they are today, in terms of not only their gameplay, but culturally. We talked about the brand new stadium that will hopefully be happening in the next few years. And we really dove into what it means to be a New England Revs supporter and also a supporter of the MLS. So there was a lot of amazing content in this episode. I am so excited to have all of our listeners get a chance to listen to this episode, because when we were doing this interview, it got me so excited about so many different things that so I hope that when you folks are listening to it, you get some of those same feelings that we did. If you like this episode, please leave us that 5-star review on your favorite podcasting app. You can find us on every single podcasting app out there. Basically, we are on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, Google Podcasts, anything that serves you podcasts, you can find us there. You can also find the video version of this podcast on our YouTube channel, which the link is in the show notes. And we post several different kinds of shows that we have. We have this podcast we post every week. We have a MLS recap show that we started recently. And we also have a weekly top 10 talking about the things that happen in the beautiful game of soccer. So go check it out. Leave us a like, leave us a subscribe there. I don't want to keep you guys from this interview too much longer, so I'm going to wrap it up here. You enjoy this episode. I hope you enjoyed as much as we did recording it. And I will leave you with this right before we go into the show. There was one thing that Seth said that I want to talk about right now prior to getting into the episode. He said that the MLS is our league here in America. It can be flawed at times. It can be not as great as other leagues in the world, but this is our league. It is something that we can call our own. It is in our own backyards, and that is why we care, and that's why we should care. So on that note, let's jump into the episode. So I don't know if you want to start by telling us a little bit about, yourself and kind of how you got involved with the Bent Musket and how all of that transpired, I guess.
Yeah, to begin, thank you guys so much for having me on and to kind of talk about the Revolution, talk about this team and the sport in this area. So I write for the Bent Musket, which is a part of SB Nation. I'm an editor over there. I started following the team when I was in college, so we're talking about 10 years ago. And it was just, it became my local team. I remember turning it on and watching it and be like, all right, so there is soccer in the United States besides the men's national team. And, seeing Taylor Twellman and Steve Ralston and Pat Noonan and Matt Reese and Charles Joseph. It was such a great time to turn on the Revolution because up to that point, the team hadn't been that great as far as history goes. And this was like the golden age with Stevie Nicol on the bench and Paul Mariner on the bench. It was really exciting to watch this team. So I became a fan, went down and went to games and enjoyed the we'll talk about the atmosphere in a little bit, but enjoyed what was down there at Gillette Stadium, and then decided that I wanted to do something a little bit different. I started to write about the team for TotalMLS.com, which is now gone. But it was a really great experience. I was able to talk to current and former players, to talk to coaches. I now have a credential through the Bent Musket, so I attend at least half the games down there in the press box and go into the locker room and talk to the players and really just try to have a pulse on the team and to try to find stories. I was one of the first people. I was the first person to break the Lee Win story about how he wasn't going to be at practice.
Oh, really?
So on the way down, I had a contact. I was down to like the first training session. I had a contact say, "Hey man, no one knows this except for you, but Lee Win is holding out right now. He won't be at practice. He wants to be traded." So, I pulled over on the side of the road and I started, writing something up and getting out there on Twitter. And I get down there and the PR people are like, "Really, dude? You had to break that like right now. You had to like get the story out there." I was like, "Yeah, you gotta do what you gotta do." So I was like the first one to get that story out there. I've broken some other stories as well. and then I just provide commentary. I mean, I'm always on Twitter trying to talk to the fans. My Twitter name is @SethMan31, and I'm just trying to interact with people, try to understand this team, and try to, just have conversations about the beautiful game, because it's a tight-knit community that we have, Revs fans and U.S. soccer fans in general, but it's a really good community to be a part of.
For sure, man. Well, that's awesome. The fact that you get to kind of be literally in the middle of all of it and really get to, like you said, break stories and be one of the front line people is really why we wanted to bring you on the show and talk to you about the Revs as a team, as an organization, and also as like a cultural, not necessarily icon, but like a cultural thing that exists, right? So, I mean, clearly you said about how like you go down there and you do all this press, but like, what do the Revs mean to you? Like, what do you look at them and think like, this is what it means to me?
Honestly, it's a nice escape. Writing about the Revs is not my full-time job. Watching soccer is not my full-time job. It's a nice escape. I'm a teacher during the day. I'm a coach as well. But this is a time where I can kind of sit back and enjoy the game and be a part of this, again, community. I can't express that enough, that maybe there's not a lot of us that are on Twitter, Revs fans and Revs reporters, but those that are on there are really passionate about this team and want to engage in conversations. I mean, I'm really fortunate to be a part of like a reporting core where we often have discussions like that. We're talking about the latest information that's out there, talking about the news and dissecting it and throwing ideas out there. I mean, we at the Bent Musket, we're talking all the time. Like, what do you think of this article? What do you think of this idea? What's going on with the team right now? Why is it not working? So for me, it's a nice escape. It's something different. It's something different dialogue to have. I kind of really try to approach this team with a unbiased thing, because, this is a reporter hat that I have, that I'm trying to get information out there, that I'm trying to be fair with my reporting, try to get multiple sources, try to ask good questions in the locker room. So I've kind of shifted a little bit away from the fandom aspect of it and more into a professional type of thing, but it's still very much an escape for me. I think that for a lot of us, that's what soccer is, that we get to step away from the real world problems and we get to watch, for 2 hours, we get to watch a game that we love, a team that we love, whatever, be in the parking lot and enjoy it with, our friends, our family, strangers. It's just a nice little thing to get away. It's a way to kind of escape the world and just embrace something that's different.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. But so, all right, let's just kind of jump right in then. So how would you rate and or judge Brad Friedel and this kind of current Revs team, both from the managerial side and also from the current crop of players? Like, kind of take us through how would you rate the Revs currently and Brad Friedel's work over the last 8 months?
So I'll start with Brad Friedel because he's obviously new and a lot of people want to know about, this former U.S. legend. He's still a U.S. legend, goalkeeping legend who's now a coach. So Friedel comes to the Revolution, and he brings a sense of professionalism to the team. That was the big word all during that early part of the season. Like, he is a professional coach. Juan Goodell had a really great quote where he said that he felt like he was going to a place of work now, that this was his job now, that he had to make sure he was on time. He had to make sure that he was performing to the highest ability possible. There's a ton of guys on this team that have lost a lot of weight because of the training regimen that Brad Friedel put in. We're talking like significant, like 8, 10, 12 pounds that are lost because people are working hard every day. They're using the right nutrients to put back into their body. Like the Gillette Stadium, the food that the catering makes is absolutely outstanding. So after a training session, they'll go and they'll eat, but they'll eat the right stuff that you need to eat in order to get back on the field either later that day, because Brad Friedel did institute 2-a-days at various points during the week, or to come back in the next day and be healthy and be prepared to go to work once again. Antonio Delamea was another one who talked about the professionalism, and he also mentioned that this is the hardest preseason that he's ever been through. And this is a guy who's 26, 27 years old, who's played in Europe, who was seeing kind of some different cultures. So Brad Friedel coming in was definitely a change in the culture in the locker room. He did a lot of different things. He expanded certain spaces. He put rules in place. So recently on Reddit, a New England Revolution fan posted the rules that were on place, the fines, that if you broke something, you had to pay a fine. So, for example, if you're late for practice, you had to pay a $100 fine. If you're late for a game, $200. Gum on the field, $50. Leaving the locker room without wearing shoes. Like, there's all these different fines that he put in place. It was pretty fascinating is that there's also a fairness aspect that goes along with this. Like, this is a guy who wants to be professional but also wants to be fair. So for those rules, you can actually appeal them. And then you could actually have a 3-man jury of your peers that are randomly picked out of a hat to hear your case according to this paper. So he brought definitely a sense of professionalism to this team where everyone's kind of getting on the same page, working hard, understanding that they want to lift a trophy by the end of the year. From my aspect, it's been really nice to talk to Brad Friedel. I think that he's been really upfront with things. I think that he's very confident, even though he's a new coach, he's very confident in his tactics and his beliefs. I've talked to him, in small groups. I've talked to him in press conferences. And again, I've been really impressed by what he's willing to say. So, for example, at one point I asked him about transfers. What's going on with the transfer window? This is a few weeks back before the summer transfer window closed.
Yep.
And a lot of times he used to kind of say, yeah, we're always looking to add players. Like, who knows? We're trying to improve the squad. I'm not going to give anything away. And Brad Friedel said, all right, we're going to have a signing within 24 to 48 hours. That's what we hope. And we might have another guy as well. And that's like a really, for him to go out there and end up being, it wasn't 48, it was a little closer to like 72 hours. But still, for him to go out there and just give that quote and say, yeah, we're going to do this, is a sign that he's confident that deals are going to get done. He's confident that he can have a relationship with the media. I've asked questions like currently what's going on is that there's problems with set pieces. They're letting in a lot of set pieces. Yeah. So I asked him, like, what's going on in training sessions? He's like, listen, we worked every single day this week on this. Okay? Guys know who they're supposed to be marking. They know how to block runs. They know everyone has their assignments. It's up to them to now fulfill those assignments. So he went through and broke it down and said, hey, this is all the things that we're doing. So these guys should be prepared. But on the day, no one's stepping up or people are missing their assignments or forgetting their role. So he's been really upfront and really honest with the media and talking to the media. And to me, that's really great. He's not combative. He's very much confident in his beliefs. He's very much confident in the system that he sets up. That having been said, the Revs are not on a good run of form. This is not a team. Yeah, this is not. I'm sure if you watch this team, this is not a team that a lot of people are interested in. I just did not interested in, but this is not a team that a lot of people are overly enthusiastic about, especially when it comes to the playoff odds. So they recently played DC United. They lost 2-0. And after that, I wrote an article basically saying Revs fans should be jealous of DC United right now. This is a team that were basically in the same exact position as the Revs last year, and now DC is surging. Okay, they got Audie Field, which ends up being, the opening day wasn't great. There's a lot of controversy about pieces of railing falling and
I did hear
bad
that, yeah.
Wi-Fi. Yeah, it wasn't great publicity. But, now they're winning. They're on a great run of form there. They got Wayne Rooney, this big-name player who's performing. I mean, this guy played 3 games in 8 days. That means Zlatan won't play on turf. Zlatan won't play in the All-Star game. So you got that type of DP, but you got Wayne Rooney who's getting bloodied every single week, and he got bloodied bloody nose a few weeks back against the Revs. And Antonio Delamea, reopened that, and he was bleeding again. And this is a guy who's like, no, I'm not playing this game. I'm going to win this game.
Right.
So they're getting like a whole new burst of energy, while the Revs are on this giant summer slump that they always go through. They're in the same stadium that they've been in for a long time. They're probably going to miss the playoffs again. So, the team, it's not really a good period right now. The team will tell you that one win changed everything, that they could easily get into a streak. Brad Friedel this week said that they're looking at this next run of games as basically being cup finals every single game. That's great rhetoric. I mean, that's what you want to hear. This team's not giving up. Mike Burns has a potential that they could sign free agents up until the roster freeze. We'll see what happens there. But, when you look at a team like DC United, who now has better odds of probably making the playoffs versus the Revs, who are kind of slumping here, it's understandable why certain people are down on the Revs right now.
Yeah, and it's got to stink from your perspective to see what the coaches are doing, what the regimented style of life and everything. And then on a little bit different note of that, the supporter culture here and you see the Revs making these strides to try to become a better team. But what would you say the supporter culture has done in hand?
Yeah, I think the supporter culture is strong. You have a few different supporters groups here, the official ones. You have the Revs Army, you have the Midnight Riders, you have the Rebellion. Have you guys been to a game at Gillette Stadium?
So when we played the Galaxy a couple weeks back, when we had, 36,000 people, I was actually sitting in the fort because I have a friend of mine whose dad is a really big part of like the Midnight Riders. So we got to really hang out in the fort. I don't know how we even got flags, but me and a couple of buddies were there. So it was actually really, really cool to get to experience the Revs game from the fort, because prior to that I had only experienced it from other seats in the lower bowl. So I just it was really cool to get to sit in the fort and really enjoy it.
Yeah, so if you were interested in the supporters culture, definitely that's the area to be. The Midnight Riders, the Revs Army, the Rebellion, they all have a nice little tailgate that happens before the game. It's very much a tailgating culture. If you go to other stadiums, it might be a little bit more of a bar culture. But here, very much, you bring your food, you bring your grill, you hang out. I mean, there are people that sometimes come just for the tailgate and then go home, because they're kind of over the team, but they still love that relationship that's out there. They love going to see their friends and family and people that they now consider it to be their family, and just to hang out in the parking lot, play soccer, talk soccer. And then sometimes people actually, not very many obviously, but some people actually just take off after that. After that, obviously, most people end up going into the stadium. The fort is the best area to be if you like the chanting and the waving the flags and, the rowdiness that can happen. Other areas, like you mentioned that you've experienced, very much quiet, a lot of sitting that's going on that's in those areas, which could be fun too. I mean, watching a game while sitting down and kind of breaking it down tactically, especially from half field, can be a fun thing to do. But if you really want that culture that you see on TV when you watch Atlanta or Portland, or I was able to actually go out to an LAFC game this past summer. It was LAFC versus LA Galaxy at the new LAFC stadium, and it was amazing. I mean, it's everything you want in soccer. I mean, it's 90 minutes of singing. And honestly, they weren't singing many different chants. I mean, you go to Gillette Stadium and you'll hear, a decent variety. It was probably 3 or 4 different chants, but because the atmosphere was so intense and everyone was standing, like in the area I was in the supporter section, you can't sit. There are no seats.
Right.
So you're right on top of the field, getting that energy, and I had no desire to sit, where sometimes when you go to the fort, especially if you sit in some of the higher seats, you might in the second half start maybe I'll sit down for a little bit, maybe I'll take this chant off. That doesn't happen in some other stadiums.
Yeah.
I went down to Orlando too. Orlando, it's amazing. Like the atmosphere, they give out, when I went, they actually gave you chant sheets. So, you knew all the lyrics to all the different chants that were going to happen. Again, 90 minutes, everyone's standing, everyone's a part of it. And then afterwards, in both of those situations, you can kind of file out and go and talk to other people that really support the game. Where at Gillette Stadium, you kind of file out and maybe go back to the parking lot. But if you go to a Bar Louie or you go to CBS Scene or you go to, somewhere else to kind of unwind, not everyone realized there was a game going on, or not people really care that much about the game. So again, it goes back to what I was talking about before, that there is a tight-knit community. There are a lot of people that care about this team that, make tifos. I think that's one thing that's kind of cool that's happened recently at Gillette Stadium. And in October 2014, the Revs supporters did their first ever tifo. And that aspect becomes something that we see more often. And it's really cool to see the creativity that comes into that. So these people care about their team. They travel places, they chant, they do all the things you want from supporters. But they don't have necessarily the best place to do it, where Gillette Stadium is kind of quiet at places, doesn't necessarily hold the sound in. Even when it's, like you mentioned, like you go to some of these really full games, you're still just in the lower bowl. Or maybe some people, like a small amount of people in the higher sections as well. So I think they do the best they can. It's a really great culture, but you really need that downtown stadium to kind of up things.
Right. So in comparison to when you've gone to LA or Orlando to view games, what would you say is not necessarily missing, or what could be? Yeah, I guess actually, what is missing from the supporter culture here in New England, in comparison to the Bank of California Stadium or Orlando City Stadium? Is it just the stadium itself? Because on one hand, you have Atlanta who's playing in a football stadium. Of course, it's more of a cathedral and it's a lot higher up and it's enclosed and things like that. But, they do have a football stadium that they are filling out, and so does Seattle. So basically what I'm trying to say is, what's missing from the supporter culture? Is it the stadium, or is it more of a pressure onto not necessarily pressure, but more focus from the supporters groups to try and kind of build it up themselves? Kind of, how do you see that?
Yeah, I think you got to get a downtown stadium. I think that's the most important thing. So when you went to the game, you're local around here. Where do you live?
We're just like about half hour away from Gillette. So like we're from Framingham, Mass. So like probably half hour, 40 minutes from Gillette.
Okay, so even that though is a little bit of a drive for you, and people from Boston, not everyone has a car. I mean, I used to know people that used to, get a zip car for the day in order to make that trip. It's a little bit of a hassle. And if you look at your team and you think about, okay, it's a summer slump, they didn't make that big signing, you all of a sudden start to lose that motivation to go to the stadium. And if you don't have those diehards that are, or even just like regular, more casual people that are going to the game every week and building that atmosphere, it's not quite what you want. I mean, you can look at the ESPN anonymous poll, and someone mentioned that basically when they go to Gillette Stadium, a player said that there's a weird vibe to it. And that's kind of what it is, like you mentioned, there are parts of the stadium that are the fort. They're up in there chanting for 90 minutes. Other parts, it's a lot of people sitting, whether it's because they're casual fans, whether it's because they're families. They're not into that whole entire culture. And that just makes it hard when only one part of it's 100% into it, and the other part's trying to, do the wave around the stadium, which is the big controversy now. Like, do you want the wave in a soccer game? Yes or no? Some people like the fan participation. Other people think it's kind of corny. They want something that's a little bit different. Something that's a little bit more hardcore, I guess, or like more soccer traditional, I guess. So it's an ongoing debate that you have, and I just don't think it's going to change until you get into a soccer-specific stadium that's, 20 to 25,000 seats in Boston. A good crowd at Gillette Stadium still feels a little empty.
Yeah.
You can get that place packed, and it's just not. And even though when they built it, they talked about it was, soccer in mind. Certainly it is, but it still doesn't give you that same type of atmosphere, that same type of craziness that you get at Orlando City. I mean, I went to Orlando City when I was at the Orange Bowl, and so that's a big stadium as well. But everyone was so bought in, and they trusted the ownership so much that everyone's going to be there and hardcore and chanting. And again, it comes down to that downtown. In the Orange Bowl, I remember filing out of the stadium afterwards, and you can go to any restaurant, and people, they don't ask you where you're coming from, if you're wearing the shirt or whatever. They don't ask you what the score was. They know what the score was because they were watching the game. They're wearing the shirt right now. They had the game on TV, and people were all about it. They had, food specials after the game because they want you to come and talk to them about it. Again, if you leave Gillette Stadium, you can go to the parking lot, but if you go to I love this bar or wherever that's there at Gillette Stadium, a lot of people didn't know there was a game. They didn't necessarily know what was going on. And if they did know what was going on, they don't necessarily care to talk about it. And they don't necessarily know the roster, who scored the goals. So once you get that downtown stadium, I'm thinking of, 98.5, the Sports Hub, recently did a interview with Jonathan Kraft. And he said, you know what, Atlanta, LAFC, Portland, they are inspirations to us in a lot of ways. We look at them and say, that's what you need to do. We need to make sure we get the stadium right, in the right place, and we're going to. He pledged, we are going to get this done. We are working diligently. We have things that are up in the air. We can't talk about them. We don't want to say anything until anything's official, but we are working hard to get this thing done, and we want to do it right. Because if you look at a place like Chicago Fire, they built, a decent stadium, but it's hard to get to. People don't want to make that drive if the team is losing. They don't want to make that drive whatever, if conditions are bad, if it's a potential of rain, is it worth it today or should we just watch the game at home? You don't want fans to have that debate. You want to be able to say, okay, the stadium, it's easy to get to, we can get to the game, we want to be a part of that culture, and the only way I think you can do that is if it's in Boston. And I think the team recognizes that once you get that stadium in Boston, things are going to kind of start to build up. The fan culture is going to become even stronger. There's going to be more people that are dedicated to the game week in and week out, and that place is just going to be rocking, just like all the other places that you mentioned. It is weird to think about Atlanta kind of being in a similar situation as the Revs, but at the same time, they're in a different situation because the way they're spending, their dedication to the team, the location of the stadium. I mean, it's and also the winning culture is part of it too. Like the fact that Atlanta's winning right now does change things because when the Revs are winning, they end up getting decent attendance and they end up getting some good fan culture and good fan support.
And have you heard of any like concrete news about the stadium, or has it really just been whispers?
Wouldn't it be amazing for you guys and for me if I could break some sort of big news right now? All right, here's the stadium's coming in here. I mean, you guys have probably heard, and your listeners have probably heard the rumors that are out there. I mean, the team got pretty close with UMass at one point. Yeah. They actually had renderings that they showed us to say, hey, look, like this isn't something that we're joking around about. This isn't just like something that we're floating out there to make you buy season tickets. Like, we are working hard. This is something we actually thought might happen. And the Crafts put out an official statement, which doesn't happen very often when it comes to stadiums, saying, like, here's what we have been doing. It got blocked. We're still dedicated to trying to find other areas. Recently, the big rumor that's out there right now, Tom Quinlan is the person that put it out there, is that they might be looking around the Harvard area.
Okay.
I haven't heard anything confirming that. I haven't heard anything more than just him saying that. But, I think any Reds fans just like the idea of hearing some rumors because, like I mentioned before, Jonathan Kraft has said that they're probably not going to say anything until it's 100% concrete, that this is definitely going to happen, shovels in the ground. They don't want to put rumors out there. They don't even want to probably put timelines out there anymore because they don't want to get it wrong. I mean, it's hard to build in Boston. I think that's the big thing. And I think you do have to give them credit for not just giving up. I just, tweeted this out right before I came on the podcast that, you have the issue with Pawtucket and McCoy Stadium. Yep. So officials in Pawtucket, a night or two ago were saying that they should talk to the Revs about moving to McCoy Stadium.
Yeah.
And I mean, it sounds good in the short term, to have a soccer-specific stadium, to have a home of their own. But really, it's not going to be good long term. You have to get in Boston. You have to get in the right area. And there's nothing concrete out there right now. The thing that Revs fans got most excited about was one of the Miami co-owners saying that the Revs were going to build a stadium next to the Garden. He said this like very nonchalantly during an hour-long meeting that he had with media, and everyone was like, "Wait, did he just break news about this?" Since then, it's come out that he might have heard something and just misinterpreted what was going on. Like maybe somebody said they were looking at that area, but there's no concrete stadium news. There's nothing that's out there right now. I mean, I do believe I've heard a lot of people, including bigger media names that are anticipating sometime soon some decent news about this. Whether it's a year or two away, they do anticipate that this is on the docket. That it's not as far off as other people think. But there's nothing concrete to kind of put out there right now. It's still a waiting game to see when they can finally find the stadium that they long desire.
Right, and I think it's very interesting. Circling back to a point you made about how the fact that Atlanta is winning, and that makes it easier to support a team when they're winning, of course, clearly. And especially in the case of, you also mentioned Chicago Fire, having their stadium be a little further away, and sometimes when their team isn't playing that well, definitely don't have as much support, because like you said, sometimes they think about whether should I go, if it's raining, or is it too far? So my next question to you is really is winning and being a good team super necessary to cultivate that good fan culture? Do you think that, because in all honesty, there are times when I watch the Revs this season, I've been trying to catch every game that I possibly can. There are times when I watch a game and I think, man, our attack is very fluid. The guys up front look like they're linking up very well, and they can put together a lot of amazing plays. But then it seems like, clearly our biggest issue is the defense and just brain lapses where we keep giving up these silly goals. So kind of basically is establishing a winning culture as super important to getting the Revs to be well supported?
I think so. I mean, in Stevie Nichols' autobiography, he talked about in 2007, the Crafts had actually organized a parade that would go through Boston because they really thought the team was going to bring home the MLS Cup. So just imagine that. Imagine, a parade through Boston basically saying, hey, we're soccer in this region. We're winners. You should come and support us. Because Boston is a place that loves winners. Like they start supporting teams when they win more often, whether it's the Patriots or the Celtics or the Red Sox. When these teams aren't competitive, when they're on losing streaks, when they're not considered to be like the top echelon of their division, of their league, then people start to kind of drop off and don't care quite as much. So I think when you look back and you think about all those MLS Cups that they went to, especially during that, 2006, 2007 period there, winning one of those, I think would have done wonders for this team. It would have been a sign that they have arrived, and maybe people start to make that trip out to Gillette Stadium a little bit more. Fast forward to, 2014, 15, 16, that type of era. You have Jermaine Jones that comes in 2014. They make it to the MLS Cup. And if you look back at the stats out there as far as like the best attended Revolution games ever in the history of this team, 4 of the top 10 Revs games at Gillette Stadium come during 14 and 15. So
right.
What's kind of different there? One, the team is winning. One, the team is competitive. 2, you got that big name. I mean, Jermaine Jones was a big deal.
He was.
Everyone wanted to be there. That guy was amazing in every single facet. Like, he was great to talk to because he gave you the quote you wanted to have.
Yep.
He was, a guy who was supportive of his teammates. He was the guy who, like one of my favorite things about Jermaine Jones was he would make a mistake defensively, and then you knew he was going to score an assist, like, 10 or 15 minutes later, because that was on his mind so much that he was the one that messed up his mark or whatever it might be, messed up his tackle, that he had to then go out and score. So there was such an atmosphere of, we are winners, like, you should come support this team because everything we're doing right now is going to be memorable sometime in the future. Now, it's can we win? Maybe. Will we lose? I don't know, probably. Like, there's no winning culture right now where you go out to the stadium and believe that, oh man, this team is going to win and they're going to win the MLS Cup and it's going to be amazing. There's a lot more people that are, more passive in their fandom. They don't care quite as much. So winning gets people out there because they want to support winners. They want to buy the jerseys of winners. They want to be proud that they're from this area. If your team goes through this summer swoon every single year, people don't care quite as much. They don't want to make the drive out. And especially if, you look at the transfer window and they sign, Christian Machado, who's a guy they wanted since the winter, and he's been here for 3 games. He's played 3 minutes. Yeah. This is a guy they've looked at for a long time, and it looks like he's a depth signing, which is fine, but that's not going to get anyone to get to Gillette Stadium. That's not going to get anyone to believe that culture has changed. And they signed Michael Mancian as a defender, which fit a need and could be a pretty decent pick, but he's currently the highest paid defender in MLS. And really? He comes in, and he plays currently the highest paid defender in MLS. He comes in, he plays, only 2 training sessions, so you have to give the guy some leeway. Yep. But the team ends up giving up 2 goals and losing 2-0 to DC United. Yeah. And he had some good moments. He had some good clearances on crosses, but he almost scored an own goal too if Matt Turner didn't make a big save. Mm. So that doesn't get anyone excited. I mean, there was talk of Geoff Cameron coming.
Yeah.
And I don't know how realistic it was, and he definitely wanted some pretty outrageous money, and I don't know if he's worth that type of money. But that moves the needle a little bit. He's a local guy. He's a national team player. He played over in Europe. I mean, I don't know. Would that get you guys to go out for another game or two, or a little bit more often if you heard about Geoff Cameron joining the team?
So I've always liked Geoff Cameron. I followed him, when he's played in the Premier League, and I loved seeing him on the U.S. men's national team. So if he were to come to the Revs, that 100% would get me more excited. Just because of the name on the sheet, being able to be confident in being like, all right, Geoff Cameron, who has played for the U.S. so many times and has had legit experience on the team sheet, that would get me excited because at least I would know that in my defense, we would have a big name player that I could look at and be like, damn, we have Geoff Cameron. So I personally would get a lot more excited if he had signed.
Yeah, and I would 100% agree. I think some fans, I mean, not all the times with like the more diehard fans, but I think some fans need just a little bit of sugar on top to kind of get them to be out there. And when they see a name like that come on the sheet, it would make it more of an exciting event, I would think.
Yeah, and I think that you guys hit it on the head there in the sense that it's almost also a sign. Like, so he'll obviously hopefully help you win games and stuff, but it's also just almost a sign that this team's going to be spending and that they want to be, competitive in this global market. And again, I'm not sure if Geoff Cameron is worth it for the money he was asking, and he's still not in MLS. So
I can see that.
Obviously, other teams kind of maybe made a pass on him, but I remember when Jermaine Jones came, and there, I think Bostonian, I think was the magazine. They had a big picture of Jermaine Jones on it, and I think the caption was "Game Changer." It was like this was supposed to be a landmark moment for this team that they were going to get to the MLS Cup, that maybe that they were going to start being that upper echelon team that was going to spend a little bit more money and go for those big names. And since then, I mean, Xavier Kouassi was a DP signing. You can't fault them for that signing because you can't anticipate that he's going to get that knee injury and never really recover the same way.
Yeah.
I mean, Claude Dielna is a DP right now, and he's not even making the 18. And this is a year removed from when he signed his contract. So he goes from, being a DP signing that's in your back line to, Brad Friedel named him the captain at the beginning of the year, and now he's not even making the 18. Kai Kamara was a DP that came over and that, really didn't work out for the Revs. So they're they are spending some money, but it's not the big names. It's not anything that's going to get anyone overly excited per se. So especially if these teams go on these slumps, people start to say, should we go out there? Is it worth making the trip? I mean, there's a lot of people on the NA Revs hashtag right now that are talking about, I've been a supporter for 5, 10, whatever amount of years, and I'm starting to lose connection to this team. I just don't, if it's between hanging out with my friends and watching the game at home, I'm just going to go hang out with my friends. I'll catch the highlights later. And sports isn't supposed to be like that. Sports is supposed to be, hey, I'm sorry, it's Saturday night. It's a Revs game. I don't care. I'm watching this game. You guys can have the most fun night of your life, but I have to watch my team. And there are some people now that are kind of losing that connection and don't care quite as much.
Right, and so the thing about the DPs that I find so interesting is actually even something that we talked about with DC United. They bring in Wayne Rooney, which, a lot of people do kind of criticize how some MLS teams bring in these older, they call it almost like a retirement league, but clearly we can see with Wayne Rooney that he is still producing at a very high level. I think that, do you think in a way that the Crafts are neglecting to sign good DPs, or is it just a lack of availability, a lack of wanting to commit? Because I feel like and to your point, we've signed Kouassi and Kamara, but these players are all not necessarily on the same echelon of Ibrahimovic and Wayne Rooney, because in my opinion, I feel like it shouldn't be that hard of a sell for someone to want to come to New England, where you can look at them and be like, hey, look, we have by far the best sports town in the United States, in Boston, and if you come here and you play out of your mind and you turn this team around, you will forever be known as a legend. So for me, in my mind, I think that the sell to get a DP here shouldn't necessarily be that difficult. So do you think it's a matter of neglecting, or are they too worried about the Pats to really care, or is it just a lack of availability?
I do think it's hard to get some certain players to come and play at Gillette Stadium because of the turf.
Right.
Zlatan doesn't come here. Thierry Henry only played that one playoff game, his final game ever. His final game ever, by the way, was at Gillette Stadium, which is pretty crazy to think about. He's another one, speaking of talking to people in the locker room. So everyone obviously wanted to talk to Thierry Henry after the playoff game.
Yep.
The Revs beat them. So we all go into the locker room. He takes his time, he's getting out of the shower or whatever, putting his clothes on, getting ready. And lots of us all surrounding him, and he goes, "You guys ready?" And people were like, yep. And he said, well done to New England, and just kind of walked away. That's basically all his comment was in that moment. And I remember one of the guys was like, what a legend. One of the reporters, what a legend. That was the last thing that he was saying after the game. But yeah, back to the point, I think that turf at Gillette Stadium isn't really attractive. I think that, the drive to Foxborough, I mean, it's not in Boston. I mean, it's a part of New England. It is a Boston nearby team.
Yeah, but it's also like 40 minutes from Boston, so definitely like not really in or near the city.
Totally. And I think obviously there's also aspects about how does that factor into negotiations. You imagine that players might want a little bit more if they are going to play at Gillette Stadium. Again, I think it just comes down to that when you get an urban stadium, you're going to see an uptick in the players that come over, the money that's spent, the fan culture. Another thing that's brought up a lot is that you have a legend, Taylor Twellman, number 20, 101 goals for the Revolution, concussions end his career early, and they haven't officially retired his jersey, but when a player comes over and asks for number 20, they're like, you can't have that, And it's almost like they're waiting for opening up this brand new stadium to start doing some of those things, to retire jerseys or have a ring of honor or have a testimonial for some of the guys, the former players, bring some of those guys back to have a old timers game, similar to like when they closed down RFK and you had all those guys come back and play that game. It's almost like you need to have that new stadium in order to change the culture and change things around. Again, I think that there are positive things that this team is doing. You look at, Christian Pania is a great find, a great player, a game changer. Turner has established himself as being a guy who could someday play for the national team. But those big names, for whatever reason, whether it's because they don't want to play here, because there's uncertainty about if it's worth the money at this current time. I mean, I'm not really 100% sure, but you're probably not going to get. I'll also go back and say there have been big-name players that have expressed interest in coming here before, or that the Revs have gone into like later negotiations with, but never really kind of gotten the final deal done. So there is always a possibility that you might see someone come, but I think if you're looking at like a Zlatan, like he's never going to come.
Yeah.
Him and Rich just doesn't make sense in this time of his career, coming off of a knee surgery, for him to come here. He's always going to end up in a LA team on grass, something like that. So the Revs culture is a little bit different right now as far as how do they build a roster and what it might look like, considering their current situation.
And I think you made a huge point with. Sorry, I literally just lost my train of thought so bad. I think. Oh, sorry, got it back. Basically, I think it's very interesting that it's almost as if the Revs have been playing a waiting game for years and years on the stadium to really put forward to really start to establish their culture. But it almost seems like the longer we wait, we're losing more and more people as devout supporters. Like you said, you have people on Twitter talking about how they've been supporting this team for ages, and now they're almost becoming a little bit too relaxed about it. They're like, oh, okay, I'll just catch the highlights like you said. So it is a weird situation, because I agree with you. I think that a lot of all of this really hinges on that stadium getting done.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I mean, but again, it's hard. Exactly what you're saying, that you want it to be there now. You want to make sure you retain these fans and make sure that like the culture is being built up and whatnot. But you also can't rush the stadium when you want you want to try to get that perfect situation.
Right.
I'm sure they probably could have built one in Rhode Island right now, or they could have built one in, I don't know, even New Hampshire or something like that. I'm sure they could have, but in the long run, is it worth it?
So my question to you is, maybe you can just elaborate a little bit. If you had to, because I have heard talk about them doing, something in Providence, right? So in a situation where they were to build a stadium in Providence versus building it in Boston, how would that shake out in the long run? Because I feel like with the population in Boston and the demographics in Boston, it's so ripe for soccer. It's all of the things that would make it work so well. But how far off is Providence from Boston in terms of like effectiveness of creating, of being able to create that culture?
I think what you'd have to see in Providence is you'd have to see a USL team first and go through that path of a Portland or an Orlando where they prove that they can get X amount of people out every single week, and they would have to like kind of rise up into an MLS team. Like I just can't imagine the Revs saying, you know what, we're ditching Boston and we're gonna kind of roll the dice here in Providence, because Providence might work out. I mean, if you look at World Cup ratings, they're usually pretty high up. Providence ends up being as one of the top 10, 15, wherever it might be. So there's like kind of some promise there, but it's just not Boston. It's not, like you said, Boston has that winning culture. Putting yourself there puts you right next to the Bruins and the Celtics and all these legendary teams. Now you're in the same exact city, and you can go on the T to get to the game, and you can, have that culture and that vibe. And even those fans that have gone almost certainly will come back because they love soccer. They're just tired of investing their money in something that isn't always contending, that's going through the same slumps, and they have to drive out there, and they have to, it's too hard for them. If you plop down that beautiful new stadium that has all the nice things, and I'll go back and say this, the Crafts have recently been to Minnesota. They've recently been, they were down at the game at DC United. So you imagine that besides supporting their team, they're probably looking at some of these new stadiums and thinking about, okay, when we build a stadium, how do we want it to look? What do we want it to have as features? Like, I think they're doing a lot of this, legwork to make sure that when they have that stadium, it's going to be state of the art, it's going to be beautiful, and it's going to bring them in a lot of money. Versus if you bring it to Providence, could it work? Sure, but I think you're running a gamble much more there. So, the only way I can see it happening is if you have a USL team there, and it ends up being, you have Hartford coming in soon, that's a USL team, but it ends up kind of thriving and proving that it's actually going to be a really great culture. And then the Revs are sitting there thinking, okay, we still don't have a stadium. They've been here for 3 or 4 years, and they're, selling this place out. The fans are crazy. All right, maybe it's just better that we kind of merge these things together and make it happen here. I don't think that's a realistic thing. Again, because there's no USL team in Providence. It would take some time to develop. And then even after it develops, you'd have to have, I think the Crafts would probably want like 5 years of like sustainable growth and seeing how good that team is developing for them to kind of say, all right, that's our best route. And I think by that time, hopefully there's more concrete plans in Boston to build a stadium. So is Providence a realistic thing? I really don't see it as being realistic because it's just much more of a gamble than building one in Boston.
So in an ideal world, what would you like to see happen to the Revs?
Both on a cultural side and also like a infrastructure side, just kind of in general.
I mean, the stadium's the biggest thing, no doubt. I think that once you have a stadium, things change. I think that you'll see different players. I think you'll see maybe a different attitude around building this team. I think the supporters, culture will be pretty outstanding. I think that it'll be just as loud and just as crazy as other areas. So to me, that's the biggest thing that I want to see. That's obviously the hardest thing.
Right.
So besides that, maybe you see more proactiveness in regards to acquiring players. So this past transfer window, I was really interested in seeing another attacker be brought in because the Revs are really good at transitioning. Their high press is pretty effective, as we saw during the first half of the season.
Yep.
But the right wing in particular is a little bit weak. Juan Agudelo has good games. He has okay games. But he's not the constant threat that Pania is on the left. So if you get an attacker on the right, you're going to kind of balance things out a little bit and be a little bit more of a more dangerous and more unpredictable team. Or maybe you bring in a number 10 and move Diego out there, maybe a guy who can hold the ball a little bit and find that penetrating pass, because the Revs don't really do that, recycling the ball and find a penetrating pass. Instead, they went out and they did fit a need. Like they went out and got Mancian, who fits a need, but again, it feels kind of reactive. I mean, I could tell you at the beginning of the season that defense is going to be a problem because they had Claudielna, they had Antonio Delamea, and then they had a journeyman in Jalil Amibaba, who, fair enough, has been pretty decent this season, but he's still a guy who's bounced around this league. So, you could have, coming into the season, you should have predicted that you probably need another big name defender in case someone gets injured or drops in form or whatever. So if you're a little bit more proactive in those signings, you're probably going to have more success in building a team and having sustainable success. And I think that, again, winning is not going to make this the best culture and the best atmosphere in MLS, but it's going to help big time. So instead of making, last season last second they add Claudielna during the summer transfer window. That was kind of like oh no, we have to do something right now because our defense isn't good type of move. Fast forward 1 year later, they're doing something similar with Michael Mancian, So I'd like to see, and again, that might be a little bit hard to do because you have this change in coaching staff. Friedel kind of has to become his own man and make his own team. And I think I'm really excited about what he might do this offseason because he has produced a lot of things and kind of shown a lot of different positives as a coach. So he's already working on who he's going to bring in. But I'd like to see that happen during the offseason, early on into it. Not right before camp opens. Let's figure out that you need a right midfielder, that you need another striker, that you need all these different types of pieces, and get all those things done so that when you get to the summer transfer window, maybe it's adding one more piece as opposed to trying to add a bunch of pieces to kind of, turn around the summer slump. So, again, to me, it's a stadium, and then just being a little bit more proactive with those signings, getting those guys in a little bit earlier, and trying to make sure that top to bottom, this team is a roster that's going to be competitive, no matter if you have a big name or not. It's going to be competitive with other people in the league, and that will get fans excited, and that will get fans to show up for the games.
Awesome, man. Yeah, so just to kind of wrap up, I think our final question to you is basically, will these current Revs be able to right the ship and make the playoffs? Because they started the first half of the season pretty well. They looked, maybe not the best team in the East, clearly not, but they were doing well. And then, these past 5 games have just been horrendous. So do you think that we could maybe recapture some of that? Or do you think it's we should all just kind of look at it and be like, damn, next season we should build on this, but this season it's kind of going to go south?
So at the beginning of the season, I said they were going to miss the playoffs. I said that it's just hard for a coach to come in and put a stamp on things and really kind of, especially a new coach. I mean, he's coached other places for the U.S. youth national teams. He coached overseas a little bit with some youth teams. But he was brand new to MLS. It was always going to be difficult, I think, for him to make the playoffs. Then I saw Christian Pinilla. More than anything else, more than results, I just thought Christian Pinilla is such a weapon that he should be able to get this team close to the playoffs, probably sneak into that number 6 spot, especially because, Orlando fell off, Toronto wasn't doing well, DC seemed dead in the water, and then when the summer swoon started happening, and you see, the Revs struggle against LA Galaxy, against Orlando. They can't close out games. They're dropping points after being ahead. I've now decided that they're not going to make it. I've gone back to my original prediction. So, going back and forth all over on that one. And really, to me, the stat that sticks out is that they're 0-5-2 since June 30th.
Yeah.
They haven't won since June 30th. And if you look at DC on the other side, DC is 5-2-1 during that same stretch.
Right.
And they're not great at home. They're 6-4-3. So again, going back to that fan culture, it's 50-50 almost if they're going to win at home.
Right.
And last year, it was almost guaranteed that they're going to win or they're going to maybe draw, but they're going to put on a good show at home. This year, it's just not that same thing. And finally, you have six games on the road, 4 at home. So you have 6 games on the road to end the season, and that's just always difficult in MLS. And Friedel has come out and said that he believes it's an American thing, that it shouldn't be harder on the road, that it's not actually hard on the road, and it is. It just flat out is. Look at any team's record, and most of the teams have a hard time putting together results on the road. Charlie Davies, obviously a Revs legend, a U.S. legend, he's now the club ambassador. He came out and he said the same thing, like, hey, it's hard. Sleeping in a hotel, doing these flights, being in a different atmosphere, having the fans, say negative things or chant positive things for their team or wherever it might be. It just flat out is harder to win in MLS. So, the team will say that one game changes everything, that you can get on a winning streak and kind of see this out. And that's certainly a possibility. But right now with this team and how they're playing, it's hard to see them unless they are able to bring in a free agent that kind of brings some new life into the team, or Mancian kind of steps up and really ends up being an elite MLS, like a very elite MLS defender. It's hard to see this team turn around, so you're probably looking at them missing the playoffs again. And you know what? I think you can't judge Friedel too much yet because of that. I think that next year will be the year for you to really kind of think about, okay, was Friedel the right coach? What has he done for the team? What has he done for the culture? So next year, I think, will be a more defining year, a year that you can make more statements after the season is over.
Right, and I think that's fair. Giving Friedel a good full 2 years to then sit down and think, all right, so he's been here for 2 years. What has he done in 2 years versus like, hey, in his first year, he only had, these players to work with, and this is what he was able to do. I think definitely next year will be when we should judge him in his capacity. But sorry, one last question. I know what we said last one was the last one, but how would you kind of assess the current MLS landscape, and kind of are you happy with the MLS recently? Because we've seen a lot of teams come in and really just like make massive waves. You have LAFC who came in this year and has been phenomenal. You went to a game, you saw that atmosphere. Atlanta since last year has been absurd. And even DC with their new stadium that they've also been wanting to do for so long, it seems like even they're becoming really exciting again, with Rooney and Acosta, and they're just really playing well. Like how would you assess the current MLS landscape to how it was, say, I don't know, 10 years ago?
It's awesome. It's flat out awesome to be here and be covering the league.
Wow. Just wow. What a fantastic episode. Such great insights to hear from Seth. It was something we won't forget for a long time coming. As always, we thank you for listening. We'll catch you next week.